All right, so Joe Biden has made 31 trips to his home state of Delaware this year, but 0 trips to our southern border after unleashing the worst border crisis in U.S. history. But Biden has downplayed it all. His administration refused to call it a crisis, claiming it was just a seasonal surge. It was quickly escalating, though, to become an all-out humanitarian crisis. Now, this year, Customs and Border Protection encountered more than 1.7 million illegal migrants at our southern border. Now, the highest annual total on record ever. Now, that's nearly 4 times the number of the year before. The amount of deadly drugs and fentanyl seized at the border more than doubled this year. Illegal drugs, mostly coming across that same border, are also killing Americans under 45 at a greater rate than COVID. So where's the outrage? We saw migrant detention facilities, those kids in cages. The left screamed about it last year, being filled to overcapacity. We saw hundreds of migrants being secretly bussed in and flown in the middle of the night to all these American cities. And a humanitarian disaster under a Texas Del Rio bridge. Nearly 15,000 Haitian migrants who traveled through Mexico camped out under that bridge for days upon days. I mean, it was forever, in the most unsanitary conditions. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, who told migrants not to come, admitted that up to 12,000 of those Haitian migrants were simply just released into the country willy-nilly. Biden put Kamala Harris in charge of the border, only to find out she wanted to focus on the root causes in the Northern Triangle countries, where the majority of these migrants aren't even coming from in the first place. In fact, 378,000 migrants are estimated to have come from countries other than Mexico, Honduras, and El Salvador, or even Guatemala. Harris did absolutely nothing to fix the problem, but had the audacity to tell Americans that she and her team has made extreme progress. I would be interested in her metric on that. But things have gotten so bad that Biden was forced to backtrack to the Trump policies, like the Remain in Mexico, and now the administration is even trying to fill gaps in the border wall. So is this a sign that things might change in 22? For more on this, let's ask former acting CBP Commissioner Mark Morgan. Mark, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Carl.
So I'm kind of annoyed about this. I mean, I talked about in my monologue about all my tax dollars going to stuff like this. They are taking tax dollars, they are lighting them on fire. They have paid for sections of border wall, and now they're just going to leave them there and let these things through. Some places where the levees are, they're forced to build it back up. But this is like the worst border crisis in history. It's not like, oh, it's not so bad, but we could do something. Ever. This is the worst. Why aren't they doing anything?
Yeah, Cole, that's right. This is not just another surge that we've seen at previous times. This is a catastrophic invasion of our southwest border that we've never seen in our lifetime. Look, I look at the first 12 months of the administration. It's actually going to be over 2 million apprehensions. Another thing we don't talk enough, because that pulls, a large amount of border patrol agents off their national security job to process 2 million. Large areas of border go wide open, unmonitored, unsecure. That's why we've seen 600,000 gotaways. And there are criminals among them. There are gang members making their way to every town, city, and state. We have an increased national security vulnerability. And as you mentioned, drugs are pouring in. If we have all of this, and as you said, Carl, the worst we've seen in our lifetime, is if that has not forced this administration to shift their strategy, nothing's going to change in 2022.
Well, Mark, also, what puzzles me, and this drives me absolutely bananas, is that you have deadly fentanyl. Enough fentanyl this year came across that southern border to kill every single American, yet we're locking down cities. Like, you can't go get a cheeseburger in Manhattan without a vaccine card and a mask, and your kid's got to be basically chained to your hip. I mean, come on, man. What are the priorities here?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Look, we all know that old saying, hey, it's the economy, stupid. Well, it's the same thing. It's about border security, stupid, right? Look, illegal immigration is just a subset of the vast, complex threats that we face. But when you open your borders up to one threat or one crisis, like 2 million apprehensions in 12 months, you're opening your border wide open to all the crisis. That's why this is not a Republican or Democratic thing. This is an American thing. This is about securing our borders first and foremost. And this administration inherited the most secure border in our lifetime, and they threw it away with their open border policy. Meanwhile, this Secretary Mayorkas is still doubling down on the borders are closed. Meanwhile, we've had 2 million apprehensions, 600,000 gotaways.
They're not even close to close. And since Kamala's Harris, look, when you're vice president, you have basically 2 jobs. It's sit where you're told and don't die. She wanted more responsibility, so they gave her a 3rd job, which was like, hey, you're the border czar. So Biden's now leaning. She failed miserably. I mean, like, she gets a big fat F for that. She failed so badly, though, that Biden is setting up. Now, I want you to, weigh in on this. Biden's leaning on U.S. companies, private sector companies, to convince migrants from like El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, stay home. They're announcing like another round of private investment into these countries as like a partnership with American companies. Mark my words, Mark, that they are setting this up because if they keep coming, they're going to blame those private companies and said, well, we tried to work with them and they didn't get the job done. So, wash our hands of it, right?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We've seen that. This has gone well beyond, unfortunately, what we've become accustomed to, the typical spin and misdirection from politicians or from D.C. This is about blatant lies. This is about blaming everybody but themselves, not taking responsibility for anything they do. They'll scapegoat the own men and women that are on the front lines trying to protect our borders to protect themselves. So I couldn't agree more with you. And here's another thing that's frustrating to me. It's like they're making it sound like it's the first time ever that we thought about root causes, or it's the first time ever that we've helped the Northern Triangle countries. It's a lie. Administration after administration has done the same thing.
Right.
But here's what we did different on the Trump administration. We said, yeah, we're going to continue to work with those countries, but we're not going to rely on those countries to do our job to protect our borders. The United States, we're going to secure our borders while simultaneously we're going to work with those countries. This administration has thrown that out the window.
Yeah, and Mark, and I only got about 3 seconds. They're yelling at me in my ear, but correct me if I'm wrong. There still are kids in cages, right?
Yes.
I mean, for all the outrage they had, you would think that they would have fixed the problem. I realize they stopped calling them tents and they're now soft-shelled structures or something like that.
That's right.
Change the name. That makes it a whole lot better. Former Acting CBP Commissioner Mark Morgan, always a pleasure, sir.
The hypocrisy. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.